Oh my gosh, I can't believe this.
I've had my share of bad birthdays. My girlfriend broke up with me on my 17th. I threw up into my own shoe on my 18th. But none of that compares to my 8th birthday. That one still gives me nightmares. I'm 23 now, and only recently learned what really happened that day. It's all I think about. I need to tell someone, anyone, just to keep from going insane. When I turned 8, I was actually excited. My parents had promised to raise my allowance, and when my older brother David left for college a few months later, I'd finally get his room all to myself. No more sharing a bunk bed with my twin brother Timothy. Jimmy and I couldn't have been more different. I was quiet, careful, the kind of kid who followed every rule. Jimmy was the opposite, wild, fearless, the kind of kid who'd climb fences, wander off for hours, and come home covered in dirt. We were supposed to stay within sight of our house, but Jimmy treated rules like dares. Even though we were twins, we didn't look it. I had our dad's pale skin, dark eyes, and black hair. Jimmy had golden hair that fell past his shoulders, and skin that tanned beautifully in the sunday. He was the kind of kid people naturally liked, and I loved him, even when I was jealous. I always covered for him, telling Mom he was at a friend's house when he was really out somewhere he shouldn't be. Because of how we were born, me at 11:57 p.m. on August 1st, Jimmy at 12:04 a.m. on August 2nd, we technically had different birthdays. That year, though, we decided to share a party. We had just started at a new school and made the same friends, so it made sense. 25 kids, one big party. The theme was jungle adventure. Our parents went all out, fake vines hung from the ceiling, green streamers everywhere, and jungle sounds playing from a speaker. Everyone came dressed as animals. I was a giraffe. Jimmy was a lion, his favorite animal. He spent the whole morning running around the house roaring at people. By 3 p.m., the house was packed with kids. We opened presents, ate jungle-themed snacks, and played games. The house smelled like frosting and sweat, the air thick with laughter. After a while, someone suggested hide and seek. We made Holly, the smallest girl in our class, the seeker. Everyone else ran to find hiding spots while she counted loudly by the front door. 30, she shouted, and the house went silent. It was all fun at first. Holly found the first few kids easily. We laughed and helped her search for the rest. Before long, almost everyone was found, except Jimmy. We checked under beds, inside closets, behind curtains, even in the basement. Nothing. At first, I thought it was hilarious that he'd found such a good spot. But as the sun started to set, the laughter faded. When Mom asked what we were doing, I said, "We're still looking for Jimmy. He must have found the best hiding spot ever." Her smile disappeared instantly. "Still?" she asked. "You've been playing for hours." I'll never forget the look on her face when I nodded. That's when everything changed. Parents started showing up to pick up their kids, but no one was leaving. Instead, they joined the search. My mom's voice trembled as she called Jimmy's name over and over. My dad ran up and down the street with a flashlight. By nightfall, they had called 911. I don't remember much about that night. The police came, dogs barked, lights flashed through the windows. Everyone kept saying his name like it would bring him back. But Jimmy was gone. My parents put me to bed together that night, something they hadn't done in years. Neither of them looked at Jimmy's side of the bed. It felt wrong, like there was a hole in the room, a hole where my brother should have been. The following week was a blur of people coming and going, officers, neighbors, reporters. Search parties combed through the woods behind our house, over and over, until the ground was trampled flat. No one found a thing. Eventually, my older brother left for college. Mom packed Jimmy's things in boxes and carried them up to the attic, crying the whole time. I moved into David's old room. For years, that was that. Jimmy was just gone. About a year later, right after my 9th birthday, I went into the woods behind our house. My parents had forbidden it, but I didn't care. It felt like Jimmy's place, and somehow, being there made me feel closer to him. I told Mom I was going to a friend's house, slipped through a neighbor's yard, and ducked into the trees. It was quiet that day, just the sound of my sneakers crunching on leaves. I was swinging a stick at tree trunks when something yellow caught my eye. It looked wrong, bright against all the green. When I got closer, I saw what it was. A piece of fabric. Soft, dirty, yellow. Jimmy's lion costume. I froze. It was clean, too clean. Like someone had washed it before leaving it there. But it was worn. Frayed seams, a few small holes. I picked it up, heart racing, and ran all the way home. I thought my parents would be happy. They weren't. Mom fell to her knees, sobbing. Dad grabbed the phone and called the police. They asked me 1,000 questions. Where did you find it? Was anyone there? Did you see anything else? I told them everything. Then Mom and Dad screamed at me for disobeying them, for going into the woods. They yelled so hard their voices broke. I thought they were being cruel. Now I know they were terrified. After that, life just went on. It sounds heartless, but that's what happens. People move on. I finished school, got a job at a convenience store, and stayed living with my parents. David came back home after college too. We were a family again, sort of. Except one of us was still missing. That's when I started noticing something weird. Every night, after my late shift, I'd drive past the last house on our street, the one right before the woods. It was a small, old-looking house with peeling white paint and curtains always drawn. But there was always someone at the window upstairs. A woman, maybe a little older than my mom. She never turned on the light, but the street lamp outside was enough to make out her face. She was smiling, always smiling, and she was looking right at me. At first, I told myself it was nothing, coincidence. But she was there every single night. Same window, same expression, that faint, eerie smile. Like she knew something I didn't. It got to the point where I started taking longer routes home just to avoid her street. But my house was at the other end, and turning around at the dead end was the only convenient way to park for my morning shift. I tried not to look, but my eyes always found her face. Frozen, grinning, watching me drive by. By the time I turned 22, birthdays had become something I dreaded. They always reminded me of Jimmy. So, that night, my brother David came over, and we decided to get wasted drunk and high enough to forget everything. When our parents started crying in the next room, we grabbed our bottles and headed outside. We ended up in the woods, not far from where I'd found Jimmy's lion costume all those years ago. The air smelled like rain and earth. We were sitting against a tree when a light flicked on through the trees. There was the house at the end of the street. The one with the woman. Through the window, we saw her in the kitchen. She was taking a cake out of the fridge. We laughed at first, just two drunk idiots spying on a neighbor, but then she hung up a banner that said, "Happy 22nd birthday." My laughter died instantly. David went quiet too. We just stared. The cake, the candles, the banner. She was celebrating someone's 22nd birthday, my birthday. We left, fast. Cut through the woods so she wouldn't see us. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. That was the night I realized she wasn't just some weird old lady. She was watching me for a reason. After that night in the woods, I couldn't stop thinking about her. That face in the window. That birthday banner. For days, I didn't sleep right. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing in that dim window, smiling, watching, waiting. I started wondering if she'd been watching me my whole life. If she'd been there even back when Jimmy disappeared. David told me to call the cops. I didn't want to. It felt stupid. But the longer I thought about that happy 22nd birthday banner, the more I needed answers. So, I finally called. I told the woman on the phone everything. About the nightly staring, about how she'd been there for months, and how she seemed to know it was my birthday. She laughed. Actually laughed. "So, let me get this straight," she said, snorting. "She watches you through her window, and you watched her through her window. And now you're scared because she decorated for your birthday." "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. "That's right." She burst out laughing again. "Sir, I'm afraid we can't help you," she said, still giggling. Then she hung up. The sound of that dial tone burned itself into my brain. After that, I stopped calling anyone. I just stopped going out. I started cycling to work to avoid driving past her house. I went straight from work to my room and locked the door. I thought that was the end of it, but it was just the calm before everything fell apart. A few weeks later, I came home from work one night and found 2 police cars parked outside our house. There was a white tent set up at the end of the street. surrounded by flashing lights and yellow tape. I froze in the driveway. Mom and Dad were inside with 2 officers, both looking grim. David was sitting on the couch, staring at the floor. Mom had a tissue clutched in her hand, already soaked through. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "We were waiting for you," she said quietly. "The officers told us they'd investigated the woman from the end of our street, Amanda Cole. Apparently, there had been dozens of complaints about her for years. Strange noises late at night, weird phone calls to neighbors, and people constantly reporting that she watched them through her windows. I wasn't the only one. The police had gone to check on her earlier that day. They knocked, but she refused to open the door, just screamed at them to leave her alone. As they turned to go, they heard it. A voice. A man's voice, faint, muffled. He was crying out from inside the house, calling for help. That was enough. They kicked in the door and went inside. The smell hit them first. Rot and damp, like a basement that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. They followed the sound of crying down the stairs. Amanda had run into the basement, trying to block the door. When they forced it open, they found something that one of the officers later described as a living nightmare. The walls were covered in grime. The air was thick and wet. And there, chained to a radiator, was a man, barely alive. Naked, bruised, and so thin his ribs pushed through his skin. A dirty bowl of water was glued to the floor beside him. The air reeked of human waste and bleach. When the police burst in, Amanda screamed, "You can't take my baby!" She grabbed a kitchen knife and tried to lunge at them. Before they could stop her, she slit her wrists. She bled out on the concrete before the paramedics even arrived. The man she called her baby was rushed to the hospital. And that's when the officers realized who he was. Jimmy. When they said his name, everything inside me froze. Mom dropped the tissue she'd been holding. David's head snapped up. "Timothy Wright," the officer said, reading from his notepad. "Your brother." Mom started sobbing so loudly that I couldn't hear what the rest of the officer's sentence was. All I remember is the word alive. We were allowed to see him after giving our statements. I don't know what I expected. Some miracle reunion, maybe. But when we walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized him. Jimmy was lying in a hospital bed, wrapped in blankets, IVs in both arms. He looked 8, not literally, but the way he moved, the way he spoke like a kid. He smiled when he saw us, this small, confused smile, like he was waking up from a dream. "Hey," he said softly, "you came to my party." Mom collapsed beside his bed. Dad couldn't even look at him without crying. David and I just stood there, completely hollow. Jimmy started talking, slowly, like each word was heavy. He told us what had happened. On our 8th birthday, after hiding in the woods during the game, Jimmy had met Amanda. She told him she had candy and soda at her house, that she wanted to throw a special birthday party for the birthday boy. He followed her. Of course he did, he was 8. When it got dark and he said he wanted to go home, she told him he couldn't. Then she dragged him down into the basement and chained him to the radiator. For days, he said, she left him there with nothing but a bowl of water. He'd cry until his voice was gone. After about a week, she started coming down more often, feeding him, bathing him, calling him my sweet boy. Eventually, she started letting him upstairs to watch TV, only children's shows. Never anything violent, never the news. If he behaved, she let him wear his lion costume. She said it made him look just right. The first time he tried to escape, she caught him. She ripped the lion suit off him and hid him until he blacked out. Then she chained him up again and left him in the dark for days. Over time, she told him things that didn't make sense until the police found her journals later. Her husband had died a few months before she took Jimmy. She believed Jimmy was her husband reborn, that she had to raise him again this time to keep him forever. Years passed like that. When Jimmy tried to keep track of time, she'd scream at him. When he asked to go outside, she'd say, "Not yet, darling. You're not ready." She told him his 22nd birthday would be special. That was how old her husband had been when they met. She said that would be the day he'd become a real man. That was the day David and I saw her through the window hanging that happy 22nd birthday sign. While we were watching from the woods, Jimmy was locked in her basement, being prepared for whatever she thought was supposed to happen. Jimmy refused to tell us the rest of what she did to him that night. He just said she told him they were finally going to be together again. The rest, we can guess. When the police arrived, he'd managed to scream for help through a vent. That's what saved him. Jimmy's still in the hospital. The doctors say he's stable, but that his mind is fractured. He's emotionally frozen at 8 years old. He still speaks like a child, still watches cartoons, still giggles when he sees candy. He doesn't understand what 22 years means. Mom brings him toys from his old room. Dad sits beside him and reads bedtime stories. They both act like nothing's wrong, like he's still 8. I visit every day. We watch old movies together, the ones we used to love as kids. He laughs at all the same parts he used to. For a few minutes, it almost feels normal. But sometimes, when the room gets quiet, he asks strange questions. Can I have my lion suit back? Or, when's my 9th birthday? And every time he asks that, I feel the same chill crawl down my spine. Because in his head, it's still Twadicentра. He's still that little boy hiding in the dark, waiting for someone to come find him. And the worst part? Some nights, when I drive home from the hospital and pass that empty house at the end of the street, I swear I still see a shadow standing at the window, just smiling. My family's always been complicated. My mom and her mother never really got along. It wasn't because of some big fight, or money, or anything like that. It was because of religion. My grandmother had these old-fashioned, obsessive beliefs. She didn't celebrate Christmas, Halloween, or any major holiday. So, the only time we ever saw her was on my birthday. Every year, we'd pack up and drive 3 hours north from Worcester to a little coastal town called Chatterblinds. That was where Grandma lived, a small red house with white trim, sitting on a cliff that overlooked the ocean. From the moment we stepped out of the car, the air smelled like salt and cold wind. It was beautiful, but lonely. Grandma was frail, always wrapped in a cardigan, her hands shaking as she poured tea or straightened a book on the shelf. But she never let her house fall apart. Every surface gleamed, every photo frame was perfectly straight. She might have been fragile, but her home looked like a museum of discipline. We never brought presents. She hated gifts. Instead, every year on my birthday, we'd have a big dinner and she'd read from one of her old books. After that, she'd play the piano. Despite everything else about her, she was an incredible pianist. When her fingers touched the keys, the house didn't feel so cold anymore. That was my birthday tradition. No cake, no candles, no laughter. Just food, music, and the sound of the ocean outside. Then, when we left, I'd open my presents in the car on the way home. That was my little reward for behaving. I was 8 years old when something strange happened. That year, while Mom and Grandma made dinner and Dad drove into town for groceries, I went exploring by myself. I followed a path that wound down from the house toward the cliffs. The tide was low, and the air smelled wet and earthy. That's when I noticed something odd. 2 cliffs met at a sharp angle, forming a narrow gap. About 4 feet up, I saw a dark opening. It looked like a small cave. I climbed up and squeezed through. Inside was a tunnel lined with these strange blue flowers, their petals almost glowing in the dim light. I plucked one, thinking Mom would like it. The tunnel opened into a wide, round chamber. 3 cracks in the wall let streams of water trickle into a shallow pool in the center. And through one hole in the ceiling, a beam of sunlight shone down like a spotlight. The reflection shimmered across the walls. But that wasn't what caught my eye. When I looked up, I froze. There was water in the ceiling. It was as if a lake had been glued upside down above me. Still, clear, and impossibly suspended. And in that water, I saw my reflection. I waved. It waved back. I jumped. It jumped. Everything was normal until I sneezed. The blue flower brushed against my nose, and I let out a loud, echoing sneeze. "Bless you," a voice said. I looked up. My reflection wasn't holding the flower. "Thanks," I said automatically, but it didn't move. It just stood there, staring at me. That's when I realized it wasn't my reflection at all. It was another boy who looked exactly like me. "Is it your birthday too?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I'm at my grandma's place." "Me too," I laughed. "We're having some kind of lamb stew tonight." "Gross." "Yeah." We talked for a while, just two kids in two different worlds. We were almost identical, but little things didn't match up. He said his dad had a different name. They lived in another town, and there were no blue flowers in his cave. As the sunlight began to fade, I told him I had to go. But before I left, I climbed partway up the wall toward that ceiling of water. He did the same on his side. I handed him the blue flower, and somehow it passed through. He caught it. He smiled. "Thanks," he said. "I'll keep it forever." I turned to leave, but he called out, "Happy birthday, other me." I laughed and shouted back, "Happy birthday, other me." Every year after that, when we went to Grandma's house, I'd sneak down to that cave, and every time, he was there waiting. We'd talk about our lives, our families, what we wanted for our birthdays. At first, we were just two curious kids comparing notes. But as the years passed, I realized how different our lives were becoming. I wished for games, toys, a TV. He wished for his dad to find work, for his family to afford a car, for the rain to stop hurting when it hit his skin. That last one stuck with me. "The rain burns?" I asked. He just nodded. "Only when it's bad." By the time I turned 14, the reflection in the ceiling didn't look the same anymore. He was wearing black. He said he'd just come from his mother and grandmother's funeral. He wanted to see me one last time. After a few minutes, he was gone. I stood there staring at the ceiling, watching the water ripple until it went still again. That same year, my grandmother gave me a birthday present for the first time ever. It was a silver cross necklace. Simple, clean, beautiful. Her name and the date were engraved on the back. I wore it every day. It felt like a reminder of her, and of the boy in the cave who probably wouldn't get anything that year. A few months later, Grandma passed away. That was the last time we ever went to Chatter Blinds. I never saw other me again. The memory faded over time. It became something I thought I'd imagined. A weird childhood dream that felt too vivid to be real. But I still wore the necklace. And every year, on my birthday, I thought about him, about how bad things must have gotten for him after that. I didn't go back until I was 23. By then, Mom had passed away in an accident. Her will said she wanted her ashes scattered near her childhood home, my grandmother's house in Chatter Blinds. Dad couldn't handle the trip, so I went alone. It was a long, silent drive. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of rain on the windshield. When I finally got there, the house was unrecognizable. The roof sagged. Vines crawled up the siding. The windows were shattered, and the air inside smelled like mold and sea salt. I set Mom's ashes free on the coast, exactly as she'd asked. The ocean was gray and restless, waves crashing like distant thunder. Before I left, I looked down the path to the cliffs. It had been 15 years, but I felt this pull, this curiosity. Was the cave still there? Had it all been real? I told myself it was stupid, but I couldn't resist. The path was overgrown, but I found the narrow gap between the cliffs. It was tighter than I remembered, but I managed to squeeze through. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. The cracks in the wall, the pool of water, the shimmering light, and above me, the reflection was still there. But this time, it wasn't empty. There was someone standing up there, looking down at me. Other me. Older now, just like me, but thinner, paler, his hair tangled and wild. He was wearing something that looked like a raincoat made from plastic scraps. And all around him were the blue flowers, grown huge, like alien sunflowers. "Hey," he said, "haven't seen you in a while." I felt my throat tighten. "You're real?" I asked. "You're really real?" He smiled faintly. "As real as you," he said, "for now at least." He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a bad night's sleep. The kind that comes from years of running. "I've been hiding," he said quietly. "It's bad out there, real bad." "What do you mean?" I asked. He glanced up, as if listening for something. "Storms, people disappearing. They say tall figures come during the night, pulling people away." His voice trembled. "The rain burns. The government's gone. The coast. It's dying." I couldn't breathe. It felt like staring at a broken version of myself. The same face, the same voice, but twisted by fear and hunger. "I don't think I'm going to make it much longer," he whispered. I looked down at my silver cross, the one Grandma gave me, and felt this wave of guilt crash through me. I'd lived such a normal life, college, a job, friends, while he'd been surviving in hell. Without thinking, I climbed up the rocky side of the cave, reaching toward that watery ceiling. "Come on," I said. "I'll pull you out. You don't have to stay there." He looked uncertain. "You sure about that?" "Yeah," I told him. "We'll figure it out, together." He smiled weakly and climbed on his end. When our hands touched the surface of the water, I felt something cold and electric. Then, I pulled. The surface rippled violently, and suddenly he was falling through. We both hit the pool below with a splash that echoed through the cave. It took me a second to realize what had just happened. He was here. In my world. He stood up slowly, blinking in disbelief. The color returned to his face. The air around him seemed to lighten. "It doesn't hurt," he whispered, then louder, laughing through tears. "It doesn't hurt anymore." He turned to me with a grin. "I'll call that a belated birthday present." I smiled back. "You're welcome, other me." We walked back to Grandma's house together. It felt unreal, two of me, walking side by side, both silent, except for the sound of rain hitting the cliffs. The house was half collapsed, but the upstairs room was still dry. We decided to stay there for the night. I had sandwiches in my bag, and he devoured them like he hadn't eaten in days. "This looks just like her house," he said, chewing fast. "Except ours burned down years ago." "What happened to your world?" I asked. He stared at the wall. "It all just fell apart. Storms, earthquakes, floods. People turned on each other." He looked at me. "You wouldn't understand what it's like to watch everything you love disappear." I didn't know what to say. He went to the bathroom and stayed there a while. When he came back, he looked like me again. Clean shaven, hair brushed, wearing one of my shirts. It was eerie, like watching a reflection step out of a mirror. We stayed up late talking. I told him about my life, my job, my friends, how I'd lost Mom. He listened with this faraway look, like he was trying to memorize every word. When midnight came, we were both exhausted but too wired to sleep. "I'll find my own way," he said suddenly. "It'd be weird for two of us to live in the same place." "Yeah," I said. "I can help you get started. Money, a bus ticket, whatever you need." He smiled faintly. "Maybe south. I always wanted to see the rainforest before it all went to hell." He looked peaceful for once. I thought we were finally safe. But I woke up a few hours later to the sound of footsteps. I blinked in the dark. Other me was standing at the window, soaked to the bone. He must have gone outside. "There's something out there," he whispered. "I went to check it out." "What do you mean, something?" He shook his head. "I don't know. It was watching me." We both stood still, listening. Then I heard it. A slow, dragging sound on the porch. Scratching, like nails against wood. My heart started pounding. It was real. He grabbed my arm. "It followed me," he hissed. "We need to move now." We could hear footsteps on the first floor. Heavy. Wet. Something was inside the house. We climbed out the window onto the metal roof. The rain was hammering down, making it slick and dangerous. The plan was to cross to the other side and climb down the old chimney ladder. He went first, and I followed. The metal was freezing against my hands. "Give me the car keys," I whispered. "I'll get the engine started." He hesitated. Even through the rain, I could see it. The suspicion in his eyes. "I can drive," he said. "You don't even know how," I whispered. "Just hand them over." He didn't. He just kept moving. We made it down the ladder. But the second my feet hit the ground, I saw them. Shapes. Tall, thin, human-like silhouettes standing just beyond the rain. They didn't move like people. More like shadows floating across the ground. Other me unlocked the car, fumbling with the buttons. He couldn't find the right one. I held out my hand. "Give them to me," I said. Just wait," he stammered. I snapped. "Now." He hit the wrong button. The car alarm screamed into the night. red and white lights flashing like sirens. Every shadow turned toward us. "Turn it off," I yelled. He finally did, but it was too late. They were closer now. 9 feet tall, arms dragging low, heads bending at impossible angles. He looked at me, panicked, then suddenly shouted, "It's him! He's the one you want!" "What?" He backed away, waving the keys. "He's the fake! I'm the real one! I was here first!" I stared at him in disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" The shadows moved faster. He pointed at me, his voice cracking. "Look, he doesn't even have the keys, the wallet, the phone. He's not me." "Unlock my phone then," I yelled. "If that's yours, unlock it." He froze. Then he did it. And of course it worked, because we were the same person. The figures turned toward me. He lunged at me, and we hit the ground, wrestling in the mud. The keys flew somewhere into the dark. He was stronger than me. His life had been one long fight for survival. He punched me hard across the face. Stars burst behind my eyes. I tried to push him off, but he grabbed me by the shirt and slammed me against the car. Then I saw movement. The shapes were surrounding us. They didn't walk. They glided. A hand-long, black, clawed, grabbed my arm. Another grabbed my leg. They lifted me off the ground like I weighed nothing. "Wait!" I screamed. "You've got the wrong one." He just stood there, silent, watching. Then something broke around my neck. My grandmother's cross. It fell into the mud. One of the shapes paused. It reached down, picked it up, and turned it over in its long fingers. "That's mine," I said. "I got it after Grandma died. He can't have one like that." The figures went still. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then they slowly put me down and turned toward him. He ran. He made it to the car, slammed the door, started the engine, but he didn't get far. The shadows moved like smoke, sliding through the rain, faster than anything human. One of them reached the car, ripped the door clean off its hinges, and dragged him out, screaming. "You don't know what you've done," he shouted as they carried him away. "You don't know." Then the night swallowed him. When the rain stopped, I found my keys and my phone on the passenger seat. The silver cross lay in my palm, cold as ice. Before I left, I went back to the cave one last time. The water above was gone, just a ceiling of rock. No reflection, no other me. For years now, I've tried to move on. I've thrown out every mirror in my house. But sometimes when I catch my reflection in a window, I swear it lingers a second too long. Like it's still watching me, waiting. Maybe I really did save him. Or maybe I just let him in. It was my 25th birthday, a late summer evening in Sacramento. The air in our little third-floor apartment felt heavy, still, almost stagnant. I've never liked birthdays. No trauma, no reason, just the discomfort of people making a big deal out of me. So that year, like most years, I planned a quiet dinner. New party, new friends. Just me and my boyfriend, David. David was predictable in the best way, skeptical, rational, calm. He didn't believe in ghosts, conspiracies, or even coincidences. That's what made me feel safe with him. Until that night. The evening started normally. David went out to grab wine. I was heading to the kitchen when I noticed something strange near the door. Sitting on the doormat, perfectly centered, was a small, beautifully wrapped box. No shipping label, no tape, no dirt. A dark violet ribbon tied with surgical precision. Our door had been locked. And yet, there it was. I picked it up, my skin prickling. It was heavier than it looked, about the size of a jewelry box. The paper was tight, smooth, expensive. I took it to the dining table and tore the paper open carefully. Inside, nestled in pale blue tissue, was an antique music box. It was beautiful dark mahogany, mother of pearl inlays, brass hinges. It looked like something from another century. And it wasn't the kind of thing you buy on a whim. When I lifted the lid, the red velvet lining gleamed under the kitchen light. Tucked inside was a small cream-colored note card. The handwriting was neat, looping, almost elegant. It read, 25 years. The melody remains the same. I've never forgotten. That was it. No name, No signature. Nothing. I froze. The message was too personal to be random, and too eerie to be a coincidence. When David got home, carrying groceries and a bouquet, he found me standing motionless by the table. He laughed it off at first. "Babe, you look like you saw a ghost. What's that?" I handed him the note. It was just sitting inside the door. He shrugged. "Probably a friend messing with you. You used to have that artsy friend Melanie, the one who sent weird postcards? She lives in Germany, David, and she'd text me first." He examined the box. "Okay, maybe someone's just being sweetly mysterious. Let's see what it plays." He wound the little brass key and let it go. The mechanism clicked, then began to play. At first, it was delicate, pretty. Then it hit me. The tune, it wasn't a song. It wasn't from any movie or lullaby. It was mine. A simple 8-note melody I used to hum as a child. When I was 6 years old, sitting by the window during rainstorms, I made up a little tune for a paper doll I'd created, a character I called the Queen of the Night. I hadn't thought about it in 20 years, and no one else ever heard it. David stopped humming along, noticing the look on my face. "What's wrong?" I whispered. "David, that's my song. I made that up as a kid." His skeptical smirk faltered. "Are you sure? Maybe it's a common melody." "No," I said flatly. "No one knows that, not even my parents." The rational part of David wanted to explain it away. "Look, someone you know made a copy of your key, snuck in, left it as a prank. Creepy, yeah, but human." But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been inside. Someone who knew me. The music box stayed on the table. I didn't dare move it, but I couldn't stand to look at it either. That eerie, faint chime echoed in my mind long after the mechanism wound down. Over the next few days, the apartment started to feel off. David kept trying to calm me down. "It's a weird coincidence, Sarah," he'd say. "You're stressed. People make mistakes." But I started to notice little things. So I set up test tiny traps. I'd leave a book turned slightly sideways on the shelf, a coaster crooked on the coffee table. Nothing obvious, but deliberate. For the first 2 days, everything stayed the same. Then came the morning of the 4th. I was making coffee. David was in the shower. I turned to the spice rack, reaching for basil, and froze. The basil and bay leaf jars had switched places. Alphabetically, they'd always been next to each other, but I never, ever mixed them up. It was such a small change, but it felt like a knife twisting in my gout. Someone had touched them. Someone had been here again. I called for David. He came out dripping, wrapped in a towel. "What is it?" I pointed. "Look, someone moved these." He sighed. "Sarah, you're spiraling. You probably just forgot." "I didn't forget," I snapped. "You don't get it. They're doing it on purpose. They're letting me know." He rubbed his temples. "Okay, let's call the cops then. What are we supposed to tell them? Someone rearranged our seasoning?" He tried to hug me, but I pulled away. That night, we barely spoke. I stayed awake, listening for sounds. Every creak of the ceiling, every faint hum of the refrigerator felt amplified. The apartment no longer felt safe, it felt inhabited. On the 3rd night, while David was out running errands, I sat on the couch, trying to distract myself with a sitcom. The music box was still on the dining table, its wooden surface reflecting the light of the TV. Then movement. A flicker. Something small on the bottom of the box. I picked it up. The black felt underneath was torn, like someone had peeled it back. My heart pounded as I ripped it off completely. Taped underneath was a photograph, a blurry, grainy image taken from above, of 2 people sitting on a couch. Our couch, me and David. Yesterday morning, coffee mugs in hand. The angle was impossible. It wasn't taken from across the street. It was from above, from the ceiling. I looked up at our 3rd floor window. The blinds were cracked. Someone had been on the roof. The air felt suddenly thin. I stumbled back, clutching the photo. It wasn't just a message anymore. It was proof. They hadn't just been in our apartment. They'd been watching us. That's when I heard it. A slow, dragging sound from above, like a shoe scraping against concrete. Then, a heavy thump. The noise came from directly over the hallway ceiling. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. They were up there, right above me. Then silence. It was the kind of silence that weighs on you, like the air itself is listening. When David finally came home, he found me crouched in the corner of the bedroom, clutching the photo and the music box like a shield. He went pale when he saw the picture. He didn't ask questions. He just locked the windows, checked the doors, and said, "Call the police, now." When the police arrived, they were polite but skeptical. They checked the locks, the windows, the hallway, the roof access. No forced entry, no footprints, nothing. One of the officers, an older guy, looked at the photo and shrugged. Could be a prank, somebody across the street with a zoom lens. I wanted to scream. We were on the 3rd floor. There was no across the street angle. They wrote a report, told us to keep an eye out, and left. That night, David double-locked the door and moved a chair under the handle. We didn't sleep. By morning, the air felt wrong again, heavy, stale, electric. David, now fully out of skeptic mode, was pacing. "We need to tear this thing apart," he said, nodding at the music box. "There's got to be something inside it." He got a screwdriver from his toolkit. I just sat at the table, staring. The box was silent, still. I didn't want to touch it again. David pried off the bottom panel. Underneath the winding mechanism was a small black device, no bigger than a thumb drive. It had a microphone grill, a recording unit. He connected it to his laptop. Thousands of files, mostly static, background noise traffic, footsteps, snoring. Then one file labeled track 0008. He double-clicked. At first, it was quiet. Then came the faint hum of that melody, my childhood tune. But it wasn't the box playing it. It was a voice, a little girl's voice. My voice. I could hear myself humming the song I made up when I was 6. The air went out of my lungs. Then came a soft giggle, followed by a man's voice, low and close to the microphone, whispering, "Queen of the Night." I fell back in my chair. David froze, staring at the screen. Neither of us said a word. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a guess. Whoever made that music box had recorded me as a child. They'd been watching me for 20 years. The melody wasn't inspired, it was archived. We packed up that night. No argument, no hesitation. We left everything in that apartment except what fit in the car. The couch, the rug, the spice rack. The music box stayed behind. We drove until sunrise and checked into a motel outside Reading. For the next week, I barely spoke. David called property management, the police, everyone. Nothing. No leads. No evidence of break-ins or tampering. The file metadata on the recorder said it was made in 2001, the year I turned 6. We moved again 2 states away this time, into a gated complex, with cameras, alarms, no roof access. We changed our phone numbers, blocked every old account, started over. For almost a year, nothing happened. No mail, no strangers, no melody. I began to breathe again. Then came my 26th birthday. David made dinner. We even laughed. For the first time in months, it felt normal. That night, while he was washing dishes, I opened an old junk email account, one I hadn't touched in years. It was pure habit, just curiosity. In the spam folder was one unread message. No subject. The sender's address read, melody-remains@protonmail.com. My heart started pounding. I didn't want to open it, but of course, I did. 3 words. Happy 26th, Queen. I didn't tell David. He was finally sleeping through the night. I deleted the message, deleted the account, but it didn't matter. The fear didn't live in the music box anymore. It lived in me. Because somewhere out there, the person who whispered to a 6-year-old girl was still listening, still waiting, and I don't think they ever stopped celebrating my birthday.